It's about time for a new recap for my Edge of the Empire campaign. This is the second recap, and unlike the first one, I can't reveal the end because we haven't gotten there yet. We've played through 3 fairly lengthy sessions, but things just keep building. The first session started with a real bang. It was action-packed, and I thought it was a very unusual way for... not unusual way really for me to start a game, but it came off in an unusual way. I'm well known for starting games in the middle of absolutely crazy action, even whole campaigns, with characters being assumed to be firmly established. I really am not a big fan of origin stories. I absolutely hate that all of the superhero movies have gone the route of first movies for the origin story and that sort of thing. So I do kind of like to start games off with a bang, but for this second story, we just pretty much jumped right into escalating action. It just kept getting bigger and bigger, and the stakes kept getting higher and higher. So I was wondering at the end of that first session, what's the second session going to be like? It's impossible to maintain this high fever pitch of action session to session to session. That just doesn't happen. And but yet the way things were going, it did seem a bit like it was going to go that way. So I was very curious to see how it would play out. So the 3 sessions which have been played in the second story went something like this. In the first session, the Bothan not spy had collected a bunch of rumors and hard facts about different underworld organizations or individuals who were hiring to get stuff done. And he presented a list to the other characters. I prepared this list in advance, and all the people connected with the list and all the locations for meeting with their fixer or with the hiring agent to get these contracts or not get these contracts. Those are planned. But from that point on, the only thing that I knew was what the person offering the contract wanted done. There were a couple where the group, if they chose that contract, they would be joining like an NPC team that had something specific to do. But that's all I knew. And so that was kind of fun. And they chose probably the contract that I was least expecting them to take. It seemed to me to be the least appealing, but possibly for meta reasons they went for it. Because we had just all pooled money together and ordered several copies of Age of Rebellion. And although it's still not here yet, pre-orders are notoriously unreliable, I guess. They very much had the Rebellion on their mind, and I guess they chose this particular contract because it seemed like the one most likely to have some kind of connection to the Rebel Alliance. They couldn't have been further off base, and of course that made things even more fun when they realized what they'd gotten themselves into. But the contract, in its base form, the one they chose, was to smuggle a group of individuals out into the common space lanes to intercept a large ship, wait for that group to scuttle that ship, and then bring them back without being detected. So they kind of thought this was going to be fun, but they really wanted to meet the team that they'd be transporting before they agreed to anything. So they met the team. They found them to be very competent, professional, prepared, and they agreed to take the contract, even after they heard that the target was the local Imperial picket ship, just a small ship that had a complement of like 30 stormtroopers and administrators, and its basic job was to patrol and be seen keeping the peace, and it makes pickups from local prisons and stockades and things, and collects them all in the system's small prison facility, and occasionally takes trips to other systems to transport prisoners that can't be dealt with here. So even though they knew what this ship was, they decided to take this contract anyway. At the end of the first session, because of obligation rearing its head, the bounty hunter had learned that a prisoner on board the ship was someone he needed to track down in order to get a very important bounty. And he'd been trying to, this bounty's connected to his obligation, so it's something he has to fulfill as a character goal. And so this was one stepping stone toward that. So it was very important. So he persuades the commando team that they're transporting to let him in on their mission. They agree, reluctantly. So at the end of the first session, they are heading off into the engine room to scuttle the ship, and he's heading off to the ship's brig to find this prisoner. And the rest of the characters aren't really sure what he's going to do there. Is he going to interrogate him? Is he going to snuff him? What? So in the last few moments of the session, nobody has any real idea what the commandos are doing, because even though their droid has sliced its way very offensively into the ship's systems and is trying to make things harder for the defensive crews on board the ship. And she's dealing with resistance from the Imperial side, but it's a very green crew, so their tactics are not what they should. And so the commando team severs the power, and no one's got any idea what they're doing in there. So all reports about their activities cease. So our bounty hunter breaks into the brig, takes care of the guards there in a pretty tense battle where he was pretty much fearing for his continued existence. He's a droid, so he wasn't really fearing for his life. And he gets in, he finds his prisoner, and he interrogates him, and he gets some very cryptic answers, but he gets enough of an idea that he's satisfied, and he terminates the prisoner and takes his eye for DNA recognition. So those sort of things took a Star Warsian turn for the dark. Like Aunt Beru, burned to death in front of her house. But he makes his way, back to the ship, kind of thing. But as he's making his way to the exit point, he sees the commandos coming back in the other direction, and they start firing on him. So the last line of the first session is double cross as he signals to the ship, which means once again at the start of the next session he had to do a leap through space, and this was both funny and stressful for the player. And so we have a nice rousing battle trying to keep the commandos from boarding their freighter, and this is how the second session starts. They get away, and the picket ship explodes, but clearly something had gone wrong. The commandos had lost their cool. There's a cool trait in Edge of the Empire, and I had used it to determine how they were going to react to this problem that they faced while trying to complete their mission. And they lost their cool, so the cohesion of command is broken, and they start to do things out of sequence. Namely, they attack the bounty hunter instead of waiting until everybody's back on board the Archon, right, where they can more easily subdue and eliminate everyone. So the explosion doesn't work the way that they planned either, and escape pods are able to go. Now, because of the bounty hunter having freed prisoners, not all these escape pods have Imperials on board, and because of the massive devastation that had already been wrought on the Imperials by the commandos fighting their way in, and by the reprisals that the Archon was taking to prevent the commandos from reboarding, it was a crapshoot whether or not an escape pod would have a surviving Imperial or not. So the characters take the Archon, and they a YT-1300 freighter, of course, and they pick up an escape pod, and in it they find, guys masquerading as Imperials, which they very quickly see through the lies and realize that these are escaped prisoners, and they decide they have nothing to offer them. And a running joke through the first 2 sessions was when they uncovered the prisoner manifest, one of them was listed as a religious fanatic, and everyone immediately assumed that this meant he was a Jedi, you know. And one of the players is obsessed with learning Force powers and has hoarded all of his experience so that he can shift to the Force-sensitive exile specialization. And so the other characters don't know that he's actually starting to develop Force powers, and that's really the source of his obsession with the Force and the Jedi and the Sith and this sort of thing. So did they or did they not find the escaped, Jedi prisoner in the escape pod? They weren't willing to let any of them on board, and so the presence of coincidence in the Star Wars universe in this case was allowed to be untested. So they go back to their headquarters, this frontier world space station, and quickly discover, of course, that there's lots of Imperial activity. And what are they going to do? So they make their way back, and they're looking for their fixer. And the whole second session was basically trying to figure out who screwed them, who set them up for elimination, what's really going on. So most of this was them trying to track down their fixer. And then as they're doing this, they realize that a lot of people in the underworld organization to whom they've become lightly affiliated, all kinds of people have been picked up by the Imperials. And so they have to stage an insertion into the prison. So, they got 2 guys dressed up as stormtrooper armor, and we got the bounty hunter going in for an interview, and we have the other droid trying to slice her way into the computer system to alter files, and they end up breaking their fixer out of the holding cell, and he's able to reveal to them that a rival underworld gang has set them all up. Has first tried to coerce major players away from their organization with different levels of success, and then framed them for this attack on the picket ship, with the expected response that there will be a huge Imperial clampdown in this region. So now the players start putting things together. Why would any criminal organization want a greater Imperial presence? And then they get it, because they already have some kind of agreement or allegiance with the Empire, that the Empire will move assets in, calm things down, wipe out the opposition, and then will want to pull their assets out and set up a new planetary governor or something like that. And that's where this group will profit. Who the group is, they're not really sure. So the second session ended with their escape from the space station, because they're definitely wanted there, down to the planet. In order to get down to the planet, they have to get through this squad of Trandoshan bounty hunters or mercs that they've been seeing around. They've known this encounter was coming, so now this is our 5th session, and the Trandoshans are waiting for them. They set up this beautiful ambush, and the characters know that they have never been in this kind of combat before. They've always had the advantage. Will they be able to take them in an ambush? And that's where we paused. So the third session started with their daring escape, where they used the stormtrooper disguise to kind of just waltz through the Trandoshans and say that they had to inspect the ship because the guys had been arrested. So while this threw the Trandoshans briefly into confusion, one of them was ordered to follow them aboard to see if there was anything valuable to be learned. So, the 2 guys in stormtrooper armor, they go up the ramp, the Trandoshan follows them, they close the ramp behind them, and they take them out. And now they know the clock is ticking. The ramp closed. That's weird. So the Trandoshans will be trying to figure out what's going on. And, the port authority's calling, saying, what's going on? And they power up the ship, and weapons are brought to bear inside the bay, and they're ordered to stand down, and the bay door starts to close, and yet they escape. And it was really tense, and they basically just made it. So that was thrilling. But that left most of the group still stranded on the station. So they had to make their way to the other side of the station, to the other major bay, which was being controlled by another gang, and try and make their way out. And rather than use this kind of deception, they went for charm, and they got together with a bunch of Ithorian merchants and schmoozed their way into their party and had a nice uneventful journey off the station and down to the planet below, where everybody hooked up together and connected with their black market contacts. Once they had done that, they were able to piece together a lot of the puzzle, and they were able to get some artifacts, such as these curious things that looked like poker chips and that had a symbol on them that would appear and disappear depending on how you shook it. And that symbol was the same as a tattoo that the upper echelon opponents had, and they began to piece things together, and they decided that they knew where they had to go. In this sector, there is the factory world that they're on. There's like an imperial dumping ground, penal colony world, and there is a world for the overseers, kind of a luxury world that's trying to make itself like a core planet, but has such a low population that it will never really be there. But only the ultra wealthy are there, and these overlords of the factories. And so they have to make their way there. So they come up with this fantastic cover story that they're roadies for a disgraced core band that's been suspected of drug violations, that's now doing an extended tour of the Outer Rim, and they are there to hook up for this leg of the tour. That's how they landed on the planet. But they're also setting up this false identity as a gambler for their smuggler character, with his assistant, personal assistant, is the Bothan Knot intelligence agent. And the bounty hunter is a bodyguard, and the hired gun is a bodyguard, and so on. So they're going to infiltrate high society and see if they can, either as a mark or as someone who looks like a player, infiltrate and learn about this organization to see how they can take it down, all while getting paid. Excellent end to the third session, and setting them up for so much more. So the session to come will, of course, focus on this kind of fish-out-of-water themes that we can feel when Luke enters Jabba's palace, although, well, he wasn't really prepared to face the kind of resistance that this powerful criminal overlord was presenting him with, or the lawlessness around him. These characters will be coming into ultra-clean, ultra-controlled, ultra-luxurious environments when they have been living aboard a flying death trap for years. So we're all looking forward to how that will go, and seeing what they can uncover, and what plan of action they will take to turn the tables from reaction to action.